Welcome to the second half of our course for today. So in the first half, we discussed about user requirements and system requirements. In the second half, we're going to discuss about functional and non-functional requirements. So as we know, the user and system requirements are forming the baseline for the contract, and they are used for different purposes, such as user requirements are being served to managers and stakeholders and even to the end user themselves, and system requirements are for developers and users and others. And all the system requirements actually come from the user requirements. But every single user and also system requirement can be divided into subcategories. This means that each user and each system requirement can also be a functional requirement or a non-functional. So previously we had two types, user, system. Now we have four. A user requirement can be functional or non-functional, and a system requirement can be functional or non-functional as well. So what are functional and non-functional requirements? Remember that functional and non-functional requirements are in fact user and system requirements. Both functional and non-functional requirements need to be written with shall be, else should be phase. Now, this is a distinction between the two. So whenever you write the requirements, it should always and always include the word shall or should. When the word shall is indicated, this means that the priority of the requirements is high. So it means that this requirement is mandatory. It has to be satisfied as soon as possible when the time comes. So this kind of arrangement helps the developers to take up their priority list so that they will actually see this on their requirements log, and then they will decide that yes, now the ones that are written with shall are the ones that we need to address early on, and the ones that we write with should are the ones that maybe we can postpone it or not take it directly right now. So both of these requirements, functional and non-functional, just like the system and user requirements, they are integrated. So essentially, every functional requirement comes from a non-functional requirement. So just as the system requirements are derived from the user requirements, the functional requirements actually derived from non-functional requirements. Now, the functional requirements are statements that are highly about what the system should do in great detail. This also gives you an advantage, an edge, that it's a high-level statement. Now, the difference between user and system is going to go even further. In the functional requirement, only one part of the system is being affected, and it is providing detail about it. In the non-functional requirements, one aspect of the system is basically affected. So if I am talking about the performance, the security, the maintainability of the system, the performance of the system, this is a non-functional requirement, because the performance of the system, basically your database is affected from it, your business style is affected from it, your user interface is affected from it. So it affects the overall application. This is called a non-functional requirement. A functional requirement, however, will affect only one part of the system, one section. So to summarize, the expected user and the type of the systems are considered in the functional requirements, but functional requirements are high-level statements of what the system should do. The user shall be able to search either all of the initial set of database or select a subset from it. The system shall provide appropriate viewers for the user to read documents in the document store. Every ordle shall be allocated a unique identifier, which is a primary key, which the user shall be able to use for potential problems encountered. Now, when you look at these statements, they are not affecting the system as a whole. They are affecting only one portion, one part of the system. So we count them as the functional requirements. Remember that each user and system requirement can be functional or non-functional. So in addition to being useful to team members or developers, we're going to go into detail to look into now if this affects only one portion of the system or the system as a whole. The non-functional requirements are actually not met directly. The non-functional requirements are met when you satisfy all the functional requirements within that category. So by achieving the functional requirements, you automatically achieve non-functional requirements. Without the existence of non-functional requirements, the system is in a critical state and it's not basically gonna function as it is intended. Non-functional requirements affect the overall architecture of the system than individual components. And this line here, I want to underline it like 5 times because this is the key difference between functional and non-functional requirements. Functional requirements affect the overall architecture of the system, where non-functional ones, affect the overall architecture, and functional one only affects the individual component, such as the user interface, such as the database features, such as something else. Luckily, you can immediately recognize non-functional requirements, so it's not that difficult. I know that it sounds really complicated, but it is very easy actually to define non-functional requirements when compared to functional requirements. When we talk about non-functional requirements, they fall into one category. You remember SUMET that we mentioned, the maintainability of the system, the efficiency, the reliability, and so forth. Yes, those features are actually the good attributes of software fall into the category of non-functional requirements. So basically, if the system is affected through byproduct organizational means, it falls into the non-functional category. We can even simplify this even further by mentioning some hints that will help you out to identify non-functional requirements directly, such as when you look at the non-functional requirements, it is affecting the performance. If it is affecting the performance of the system as a whole, is it affecting the performance in terms of usability, such as the use of the system? Does it affect the size of the software? Is it about bug and failures? Is it about security, reliability of the software? Is it about being maintainable, such as support on the portable devices? All these hints in here will help you out to identify the system if it is a non-functional requirement or not. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, cool. So basically, if you see a requirement that affects the system as one of those SUMET categories that we mentioned throughout the course several times, such as the performance, the efficiency, the security of the system, the maintainability, they automatically fall into the category. I can say that, for example, the software we're going to design should be less than 40 gigabyte. This is a non-functional requirement because it affects the system as a whole. So everything is affected from it. I can say, for example, that the website we're going to design, the website being developed, each page should be opened less than 6 seconds. So this is a performance requirement and it applies to the entire website, whether the website includes data records, whether it is a dynamic page or a static page. So you set up a standard basically for the use of that website and say that this is my aim. My aim is to make sure that it doesn't take more than 6 seconds on an average internet connection to open a web page, because we know that people do not wait after 6 seconds. They'll get bored and they'll close the window and they'll go and maybe refresh it or just close and reopen it again, or maybe completely give up. So this is like statistical knowledge. You set up a standard there, make sure that it's going to be opened within 6 or 7 seconds maximum. And then you apply this principle, this non-functional requirement, to every single component of the system and make sure that the system as a whole support this. Remember, user and system requirements can be non-functional and functional. So here are more examples. Functional requirement. Users shall only be able to log into the system through a login interface. This is a user requirement and it is functional. It tells you that it roughly gives you an idea of how you're gonna what you're gonna do in the system, but it doesn't give you any detail about how you're gonna do it, what you're gonna take, for example, to log into that specific interface. And it is only affecting one portion of the system. It is not affecting the system as a whole. So it is a functional user requirement. Another one. Each user shall be uniquely identified by an 8-digit employee number, which would also be used as the username to access the system. The username must be unique and will be used as a primary key in the user table of the database. This is quite detailed now. You see, we broke down this, so it is a system requirement. And it is still affecting one individual component of the system, and it becomes functional system requirement. We have more examples. Non-functional requirements. The system shall be easy to use. I want to underline the word easy to use. You see, this is about the usability of the system. You can catch up these phrases on the sentence, which will help you out to identify non-functional requirements instantly. Biomedical staff and shall be organized with minimal errors. So it is a non-functional requirement, but it doesn't indicate any details of what kind of what needs to be done in order to what should be how this should be, well, what needs to be done basically. So you can define it as a non-functional user requirement. If we break down this specific thing into more details, now mentioning that the training and error number would not exceed more than 4 per hour, now it gives you an idea about how this is going to be executed. Like the minimal errors now has more meaning. It means that 4 errors per hour. So that means that you have to encounter something, you have to look up something to make sure to meet to that specific outcome. So it is still a non-functional requirement because it is still about the usability, but this time it is a system requirement. So to summarize, functional and non-functional requirements in between them, the user requirement constrained with the security seems to be a non-functional requirement. However, when developed in more detail, this requirement may generate other requirements, and hence it can be a functional requirement, such as from the limited access to unauthorized users, you can go and define only admin shall be able to access the control panel. Now you make that a more defined, rather refined statement. You define the statement here. This is the definition. And when you want to talk about it even further, you refine it. The original definition serves as the non-functional requirement because it affects the system as a whole. The refined statement makes it more clear, and hence it will be functional. Any questions? Seems like everything is crystal clear. So,
Sir, I have a question.
yes, go ahead.
I want to know how we can relate this to the agile methods that we are supposed to use for our projects. Basically, in most of these methods, we're supposed to use user stories. So
Yeah.
how do we link these kinds of requirements to our user stories? For example, if we're using Kanban, we know that we're just going to put up a simple user story and then start working on it, basically with some specific issues under it. But how do we actually do this in order to make it easy for us to understand and work with?
There are multiple ways that you can do this. Specifically talking about Kanban, Kanban does this through usual stories. So basically Kanban, in people to understand it, what they do is just like what I do in here when you explain you the course, they actually explain it through by means of drawing. This is what happens through Kanban and similar approaches. When they talk about user stories, they actually draw it. So there's this guy user accessing to certain panels. Okay, let's say this is the panel that I access, and they access some data in here, and then something happens, go to there, and then that's how they break down the requirements themselves. Kanban relies on everything to be more visual rather than text. Okay, that is the nature of Kanban. It is trying to make sure that everything is represented through a visual means, either through the Kanban board, Kanban tickets, Kanban stories, and so forth. So each way that the requirements are basically refined there is through, again, going into these user stories and making sure that whatever customer needs there is just represented. So what the customer experience there, or then it is broken down into more stories or more requirements, and then they generate it. In Agile, there is no extensive process of developing the requirements documentation. Okay, so it is not extensively done. However, I will give you a second project once you finish your first, and you will do define requirements. You will define your requirements, and you will assume to do the same project now as a plan-driven approach this time instead of Agile. We're gonna look into developing the same project using a plan-driven approach, and you will see how you can divide these requirements. In an agile development approach, these are skips that are seen as a big waste of time. They don't really sit down and generate user or system requirements, because the way that agile tells you is that if you're going to spend too much time on this, then you are not going to focus on development. So right now in the project that you are doing, you do not need to generate an extensive way of requirements. You can just see or observe how other applications are dealing with it. So you make a research, you look at the applications within your category, how they deal with the problem, and you use the same thing, okay? So you do not need to discover America. you look at the similar software and you apply it in the same way. That's what you should do right now because you don't have the customer base. And whenever you design an application from scratch, and that's what you should do. You should really look into how similar applications are dealt with it, the same problem, and apply similar strategies. So Agile does not embrace this idea, but it doesn't mean that it is useless because not everything can be developed in Agile. As we discussed, this is rather a small to medium project base, so not everything is suitable to be developed in Agile. Hence, if you're going to work in other projects, such as the big ones, you will need to learn how to divide this. And that will be actually your second project, which I will give you the same topic using the same things, but this time you will assume that it's a plan-driven approach and you're going to generate these requirements. So in short, in your first project, you don't need to worry about it this much. Okay, that is why I gave you your project even before I introduced this subject. You can simply omit what you know right now in your project, because in the second project, which I will give you after you complete the first one, you will already have an exercise about this. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Any other questions? Good. So I'm going to do a bit more and then I'm going to stop. So basically, we talk about functional and non-functional requirements. And we said more examples on functional requirements and non-functional ones can be found on your book. So please read the chapter regarding this in the book and you will be able to see more examples there. I will take your question at the end, Rawan. I have only 2 slides left. A user shall be able to search the appointments list for all clinics, for example, can be a functional requirement. And also the system shall generate a list of patients each day who are expected to attend appointments on today. So when you look at these, you can divide these as functional requirements because they all regard to one individual component of the system. We already said that if the non-functional requirements are not met, the system will be useless. So we all generated in here. One detail that I like to mention is that the book takes the external requirements under non-functional requirements as domain requirements. I don't particularly agree with this because technically you have no control over these requirements. The book mentions them as external requirements, but I really don't agree with this because you have absolutely no control on external requirements of a system. You can just apply it or not. So basically, it's just outsourced requirements. They are more difficult to control. Again, a diagram from the book that says the external requirements. And as you can see under that umbrella, surprise, surprise, you have regulation requirements and ethical requirements because obviously your control on this are so limited. So what are external requirements? We can see external requirements as the domain requirements that I mentioned, which is the subject I like to cover. So if you go down, there's a third category called domain requirements. These requirements in the book, as I mentioned, are listed under non-functional requirements. However, in my slides, I'd like to take them as a separate category and put them under the umbrella of domain requirements. This means that you rely on some kind of external factor or an outsource to support these requirements. And it has to be done in that regard in order for your business model to work, such as taking an SSL security layer for your website to make sure that the access is secure, such as relying on a credit card or PayPal validation for your website. If you are designing, for example, a business model that runs through YouTube advertisements, you can use a Patreon account, right? People support each other on Patreon platform, especially YouTubers. That's how they earn money nowadays. And if your business model relies on an open source development, for example, that you want to fund your software, you can rely on campaigns like Kickstarter. Now, you do not have full control over any of these requirements, but for your project to run, you must somehow apply it. Without the money to back you up, how are you going to develop the project? So you need to apply the requirements into your project itself. But at the same time, you have absolutely no control over this requirement. These requirements are, as I told you, listed under non-functional, but I like to take them as a separate category, as the domain requirements, because they are existing requirements, but they are outside of your control. If domain's requirements are not satisfied, sometimes or most of the time, the system can be broken and not basically functioning. Such as some examples that can be given in this category are the confidentiality of the groups, such as collecting the requirements for creating a documentation. Another category can be the copyright restriction. Some documentation must be deleted immediately after arrival, such as the identification of users or whatsoever. And so these kind of requirements kind of like restrict you in some regard, but you also have no control over them. Not to 100% anyway. So how do you identify the domain requirement? There's an explicit constraint in a domain requirement, such as a standard copyright restriction, an ethical restriction, an out system factor, such as the security layer, and so forth. There's some kind of limitation put up to you so that you basically make sure that you are bound to another system or another constraint that you do not have full control. And you need to support that in order to make sure that this requirement would be satisfied. Such as if you are relying on a web service or a website to do your business, the security layer must be something that you need to satisfy in order to move on. So this is where I'm going to stop for today. Requirements engineering is going to be our next subject that we're going to discuss tomorrow. Now, I want to talk about the project itself. A lot of people are texting me that, oh, I don't have a group. I can't find a group member. I can't do this. I can't do that. Guys, we are living at the age of technology, and you are about to graduate, hopefully, when this pandemic situation is ended, you will get your diplomas. You are last year students, and you are coming to me and asking me, oh, sir, I can't find a group, I can't do this, I can't do that. Like, come on, don't be kids, please. This course is all about learning how to be a professional, and you come to a lecturer who has a PhD and 2 masters, that his time is very precious, and complain about him that, oh, I can't find a group. Like how difficult it is to go to the participant section and look up all the people who take this course, or communicate some kind of mechanism, some kind of group, either on Facebook or your WhatsApp to basically form your study groups. Am I have to tell you everything about this? Like you don't have brains to think about this in the first place? Please don't send me messages that you can't find a group, because I'm not going to reply to that. I am sorry, but if you come to the last year and you are still unable to communicate with other people to do team projects, maybe you are studying the wrong degree, because everything we do in the software world is teamwork. The entire purpose of me doing this lecture and over and over and over again, I mention in this course, the crux of all of the software processes is teamwork, nothing else. And by eliminating that fact and telling me that I don't want to work in a group, I don't want to be a part of team, you automatically eliminate yourself from the software world. If you don't want to work in a team, why are you studying software engineering or computer engineering? Everything we do in this world is about teamwork. I really don't understand some of you. Seriously. Like, you really believe that we are here to spoon feed you? Wake up, please. Okay, this is not how the real world works. You need to understand that you need to get the responsibility somehow, and your lecturer does not have to solve your problems. Your lecturer introduces you, exposes to an environment, and then you have to find your way. I am not a teacher, I am a lecturer. The difference is I share knowledge with you. It's up to you what to do with that knowledge. Okay? If you simply send me one more message about you not finding a group or team, I will simply block you from my Moodle and you will not be able to send me any more messages. Is that clear? I want to hear a yes from everyone from the chat group. Very good. Now, Ravan, you have a question. Please talk. Yes, Ravan, you have a question? You can talk.
I think there's something wrong with his mic. It's open, but we can't hear anything.
Okay, well, maybe next time then. Very good then. I am very angry about these messages. Perhaps I got 10 different messages this week that I can't find a group, I can't do this, I can't do that. Please stop sending me these messages. It really annoys me. I am dedicating my time here. Please be more professional. There are some really good people, by the way, who found their groups and who submitted very organized structures reports. I saw them. So thank you to all of them for being professional. But unfortunately, not everyone is acting within that professional perspective. Yes, Ahmed, you have a question?
Yes, sir. I have a group and I choose the topics, and I didn't reply for us like which topic we have to start to work with it, and we start you to respond for us, but
Yes,
we're
I
still
am
waiting.
actually engulfed with other activities today. You are right. I didn't get back to you perhaps. I'm going to download all the feedback now and put the feedback, the new one, into the Moodle so you will see if you can choose it. I think I replied to every one of the uploaded projects last week, right? But this week I didn't. I'm going to check them now after the course today, okay? And I will reply you latest by tomorrow. Is that okay?
Okay, cool then.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. This is the end of my lecture for today. If you don't have any questions, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
I have one more question, sorry, before you
Go
go.
ahead.
While working on our project, is it okay if we add you as the project owner on the platform that we're using?
What do you mean?
You know, there are different roles for the project. So is it okay to add you as the project owner? I mean, you don't have to do anything. It's just so that at least you would have access to be able to see it when we're done.
Yes, of course you can add me. You can also add me as a customer, so you don't have to tell me the owner or something. You can add me as a potential customer. It's up to
Okay.
you. Okay.
Okay, and another thing, if we wanted to give you the version to test somewhere down the line, you don't actually have office hours, so we just send you a message on Moodle.
You can send me an email. It works better for me.
Okay.
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 All right.
Hello,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
I've got a question, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so on the documentation of the software, what is involved, like the information? Is it about coding and also how the system works or
It's
what?
about the tools that you use to develop the software. You're going to develop a report for me that will discuss how you're going to, how you develop the tools, how you use those tools to develop that specific software. Okay. That is the purpose of the report. The report is not about the coding. This is not a coding assignment. It's about the tools that you use to develop that specific software. Okay?
Doctor, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Sorry, doctor, I had a problem with my microphone. Doctor, actually, I want to ask you about the, like Ahmed said, about the homework. Like we said, we mentioned like two different topics inside the homework, like two different projects.
I
Because
did
last time you
reply
told
to you
us,
on your feedback, though. I'm absolutely sure I replied to you. I replied to Darlington, for example. He saw the feedback and he got back to me. Did you check the feedback on the Moodle?
I'm sorry, when you say about the feedback, like where? Because I don't see it, like
Last
where I can get the.
you uploaded this, right? On the Moodle,
Yes,
the team
yes, I put in the.
and everything, you uploaded it, right?
Yes, but I put like two different projects in it, so because maybe one of them will not be available and the other one will be available, right?
Yes, and I did reply to it. Like I replied and gave you feedback. So it should be there.
I'm
It's
so,
Who
the
uploaded
next
your
one. That
project?
one. Yeah, that one.
You
That
did?
one. That one. Imagine.
sorry.
Look, your feedback is visible there. Look, this is your profile. See, Ravant, do you see on my screen?
Yeah, yes, I see it.
Look, your profile feedback is uploaded. Second-hand shop for student topic is okay. You can work on the topic. You did not provide any detail about responsibilities. Agile model you were supposed to select was not submitted. Select an Agile development model, such as Extreme Programming or Scrum. Please be aware that you are obligated to model. This is why I gave you a week to make a research on these models. You must submit now the model you are supposed to do. So your feedback was given already. It's under your profile. You go there, do the upload, look at the feedback. You will be able to read it. All right?
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Every one of you, I go through and submitted the feedback. Please message me if you didn't get it, but your feedback is there. Just go to the grading section and you will see it. All right?
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, then I'll see you guys tomorrow. Like I said, next week on Wednesday, we will probably not have a class, but I will write it on Moodle anyway. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.